Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 321, the Togepi Mirage. The episode begins right at the end of the last episode, where a huge explosion was caused by Pikachu's Thunderbolt colliding with Ninjask's Solar Beam. After the explosion had cleared, Pikachu's cheeks were sparking with electricity, ready to attack again, as it saw Colonel Hansen, and like Ash and the gang, and Miranda, and Misty, and Sarah, it wanted Colonel Hansen stopped. Before Pikachu could do anything, though, Hansen just evilly laughed as he ordered his two Ninjasks to use Hyper Beam and his Shedinja to use Solar Beam, taunting that there would be no way for Ash and the gang to win, when suddenly Misty was startled as Togepi jumped up from Misty's arms and began to glow, rising up. And this glow soon expanded into a whole-on glowing aura around Togepi as the Hyper Beam and Solar Beams got closer. Misty, along with everyone else, was in complete shock as they saw Togepi now with a determined face, sending a large barrier around itself and everyone else to absorb the Hyper Beams and Solar Beams. Unbeknownst to anyone at this time, Togepi had just used the move Safeguard. Even though Ash and the gang didn't know what this huge barrier was, they took the opportunity to use it to shield them from the attacks, as we then see that the Mirage Kingdom castle still had the upside-down illusion over it. The door of the illusion castle then begins to glow, and a large beam of light shoots down from it toward the barrier, and this causes a huge flash of light as everyone ducks down to shield themselves, not knowing if the barrier would withstand whatever this beam of light was. Hansen and Team Rocket shield their eyes as well, as the light was very bright, and they didn't have no barrier, and suddenly, the light completely disappears, going back into the door of the illusion castle, where it came from, and everything goes back to normal. No more light, nothing. Well, almost normal, because when Hansen and Team Rocket look around, they see that Ash and gang, and Sarah and Miranda and Misty had vanished. Team Rocket wondered what the fuck happened. Surprised as hell that they were all gone, but Hansen was pleased, as he grinned happily and told Team Rocket to come with him, explaining that they had a lot of work to do, since he noticed that the illusionist castle was now flickering and showing signs of disappearing, which made Hansen realize something. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had ended up in an entirely new place after they disappeared, being a large open field, as Togepi now stopped glowing and floated down to all of them. Ash and the gang were curious as to where they were, and Sarah was too, so she asked Miranda, hoping she would know, and Miranda had come to the conclusion that they were in a place called the Togepi Paradise. Ash and the gang were shocked as they didn't know what the fuck that place was, so Miranda explained that it was a place that a lot of people in the kingdom thought was just a legend, but now they knew for a fact that it was real. Although Miranda clarifies that she had known it was real for a very long time, leaving Ash and the gang and Sarah impressed, as Miranda revealed that she had been to the Togepi Paradise before Sarah's father became the king, since the Togepi Paradise was related to the coronation of a new ruler. Miranda also explained that the Mirage Kingdom protected the Togepi Paradise, and in return, the Togepi Paradise protected the kingdom, which in turn explained why Ash and the gang had entered the Togepi Paradise, in part because of the Illusionist Castle, because the Illusionist Castle was basically a gateway into the Togepi Paradise, because the Illusionist Castle was like the opposite of the real castle, much like how the Mirage Kingdom was the opposite of the Togepi Paradise, or the counterpart rather. Ash and gang, Miranda and Sarah then examined the area and saw that there were many trees and fields, and all the trees had Togepi egg markings. Miranda remarked that this place was as beautiful as she remembered it, although when they all continued on a little further into the paradise, they saw that the trees were all withered, and the sky was dark, and a lot of the plants were dead. This led Miranda to change her tune, admitting that, actually, a lot had changed since the last time she was at the paradise, hypothesizing that even though the Togepi Paradise used to be a really happy and bright paradise, all the chaos going on at the kingdom, especially with Colonel Hansen, could have caused it to start dying. Miranda's fears of the paradise dying only intensified when Max accidentally touched a nearby bit of grass and was in shock as he watched it immediately deteriorate and fucking be destroyed instantly, leading Miranda to come to the conclusion fully that the forest was dying very fast, and Togepi Paradise would probably not be a paradise for much longer. Miranda then adds that this would be a terrible thing for the Togepi, since basically all Togepi in all of existence, or all Togepi in this universe, were born in the Togepi Paradise, and they grow up there before meeting up with the people outside of the paradise. This implied that even though Togepi eggs were in the real world, the egg formed in the Togepi Paradise, and then the Togepi was like hatched out of the egg in the paradise, but then when they were ready to go to the real world, they appeared in the egg first or some shit. Anyways, Miranda also added that the Togepi Paradise also acted as a form of heaven for certain Togepi, stating that once certain Togepi died, they would return to the paradise, or certain Togepi would also return there once their mission in the real world was completed. So, for example, once they weren't needed anymore in Mirage Kingdom, then they could return to the paradise until they were needed again. Ash and the gang then commented on how if this place was known as Togepi Paradise, and there was supposed to be Togepi everywhere, it was sure weird, because they didn't see any Togepi anywhere. Suddenly, though, Togepi, sadly floating around, disappointed that there was no Togepi around, rushed off, having spotted something. Misty followed, along with the other members of the gang, and Sarah and Miranda, and they found none other than several other Togepi, although they looked pretty injured, as they were huddled against a dead tree. Misty's Togepi was concerned about them as it went up to them, and eventually one of them opened its eyes, although they were still severely injured and weak, so When Ash and the gang caught up to Misty's Togepi and saw all the injured Togepi, they were shocked, although Max quickly turned to May and told her to scan the Togepi with her Pokedex, suggesting that it may tell them a way to help the injured Togepi. So she scanned the Togepi on her Pokedex to find out more information about it, learning that Togepi was known as the lucky Pokemon, and they brought happiness to those with joyous hearts. And it then says that in times of trouble, Togepi may become sad and bring no joy. Also adding that if these times of trouble were caused by a person's impure heart, then Togepi would become exhausted. Basically, Togepi was able to sense the goodness or the badness in people's hearts, and it became weakened when it noticed bad people, basically. Misty and Miranda both came to the conclusion that the Togepi Paradise must have been dying because of how impure Hansen was and all the bad things he was doing, and Miranda suggested that Hansen probably wanted to take over the Togepi Paradise and turn the entire place into a dark, destroyed wasteland of his own. Adding that he probably wanted a domain of his own, but he didn't want the Togepi to be able to make anyone else happy. He only wanted the place to himself, so he figured that if he made the Togepi weakened, then they wouldn't be able to help anyone else. Meanwhile, back in the real world with Hansen and Team Rocket, Hansen had went over to the castle gate, knowing that the door was connected with the Togepi Paradise, and he essentially knew that the reason why the illusionary castle was disappearing was because it was representative of the Togepi Paradise. So if the Togepi Paradise was dying, as he had hoped, then that meant that the illusion would be dying as well. And Hansen figured that if the illusion was dying, and the illusion was the gateway into the Togepi Paradise, then the illusion would be weakened, so it should be easier for him to get inside the Togepi Paradise. So he went up to it with Team Rocket, and he ordered his Shedinja to use Solar Beam, and his Ninjask to use Hyper Beam, which was sent right at the gateway to Togepi Paradise on the Illusionist Castle, which counteracted with the Illusionist Castle, allowing a door to open up so Hansen could go inside. Hansen smirks evilly as Team Rocket huddle behind him, scared and shocked at Hansen's power. Back inside the Togepi Paradise, Ash and the gang and everyone else noticed a blue light that flashed for a second that was caused by Ninjask and Shedinja's attacks, and subsequently caused more trees to die. Misty's Togepi gets angered upon seeing the trees die and begins to hover away. Ash and the gang and Misty and Miranda and Sarah follow Misty's Togepi and find that the blue light may have faded, but in its replacement was a full-on portal which Team Rocket and Colonel Hansen were peering through. They were trying to enter the place. Togepi knew that Hansen was the one causing the destruction of the Togepi Paradise and went to go through the portal. And even though it made it, when Ash tried to follow it to make sure Togepi would be okay, he instead bounced back and smashed against it. Since apparently only Togepi could go to and from the paradise, or Togepi could control who entered or left the paradise. That's how Ash and the gang had made it there in the first place, although Hansen and Team Rocket couldn't get in through the portal. Hansen's plan was to lure Togepi out to him, and that's exactly what he did, since Togepi was now out in the real world, while Ash and the gang and Misty and everyone else was still in the Togepi Paradise, and they all just looked into the portal, unable to do anything, as Misty helped Ash up from when he was blown back. Misty was very distraught at her Togepi now being out of the Togepi Paradise, worried about what would happen to it, wondering why the fuck it even cared enough to go to Hansen. Anyways, Togepi then arrived back in Mirage Kingdom, forming another barrier to try and protect itself. Although Ninjask and Shedinja stopped their attacks, since they now had no reason to try and get Togepi to come out. Togepi was still angry though, since he was obviously mad at Colonel Hansen for disrupting the Togepi Paradise, leading Meowth to point out Togepi's apparent anger, and James comments that it sure took a lot to anger such a ball of joy, knowing how Togepi never seemed to get angry back when it traveled with Ash and the gang, like back when they always saw it when it traveled with Misty, you know? Hansen knew that Togepi being angry would probably make it harder for Togepi to help him with his goals, so he ordered his Ninjask to use Shadow Ball on Togepi to basically try and force it to obey him. Togepi was able to dodge the first Shadow Ball, but it was blown back into a pillar by the second as it fell to the ground injured. And Ash and the gang and Misty and all them were able to see this from the view of the portal from inside the Togepi Paradise and watched in horror as Misty screamed for Togepi, telling it to try and come back in the portal, but Togepi wouldn't listen as it was too weak to even pay attention to what Misty was saying. Misty felt fucking helpless. She couldn't even assist Togepi. With Togepi down, Hansen laughed evilly as he picked up Togepi and lifted it into the air as Team Rocket clapped, congratulating Hansen on his good job, and stating that because of Hansen grabbing Togepi, his dream of becoming the ruler of Mirage Kingdom would now come true. Hansen then instructs Team Rocket to follow him, and Team Rocket obliged as they salute him. Ash and the gang, Misty, Sarah, and Miranda all watched as Team Rocket and Hansen walked away down the path out of their view. Misty was utterly enraged and on the verge of tears because she couldn't do anything to help Togepi, and she decided to try and help Togepi as she rushed over to the portal and slammed her hand against it, trying to break out. Ash tried to help her as well, but nothing happened. Just then, though, all the other Togepi in the Togepi Paradise, specifically the injured ones, began to glow, and this caused the portal to expand, leaving Misty confused, as the portal expanded so much that it engulfed Ash and the gang, Sarah, Misty, and Miranda, and soon enough, they were all sent back to the real world. Hansen then goes to the king's throne room and demands to be the king's successor, holding up Togepi and stating that Togepi had chose him to be the successor, although the king utterly denies Hansen, knowing that the Togepi was Misty's, and proceeded to insult Hansen, stating that even if the Togepi was his, he would do everything in his power to make sure that Hansen didn't take the throne. Hansen was enraged by this, stating that the king had no right to do anything like that, and he had no proof that this Togepi was actually Misty's, and calls the king weak-minded. And then Hansen basically said that he wouldn't take no for an answer, stating that he would become the new ruler, as he sent out his Ninjask and Shedinja, and also ordered Team Rocket to surround the king and queen, and they did, also calling the king weak-minded. Very happy to be serving Hansen. The king and queen were very confused as to what was happening, obviously, and they only got more confused when all of the guards and servants that were supposed to be serving them all surrounded them and proceeded to lock the king and queen inside of the dungeon deep in the palace, as the king came to the fairly obvious conclusion that all of his servants and guards had betrayed him, likely because Hansen had manipulated them somehow. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, Misty, Sarah, and Miranda, they were all walking back to the palace through the streets of the Mirage Kingdom. Max, however, could barely focus on walking, as he was really concerned as to how they planned to beat Shedinja since it had its powerful Wonder Guard ability, knowing that if they wanted to stop Hansen, they would have to stop Shedinja. Brock was asking himself the same question, wondering how Shedinja, being a bug Pokemon, could be beaten, but that's when Brock realized that Shedinja was a bug Pokemon. So all Ash and the gang had to do was attack Shedinja with a Pokemon that was super effective against bug types, because then the Wonder Guard would be negated. So this led May to happily state that since fire types were good against bug Pokemon, her Torchic would do the trick. Upon getting just silence in response from everyone else, May was terrified that she perhaps got her type matchups wrong, and fire types weren't actually good against bug types, but Brock stated that he was just silent in awe of the fact that he didn't think of that sooner himself, and confirmed that yes, Misty's Torchic would do great against Shedinja. As Ash and the gang were talking, though, they were cut off when they heard a familiar voice, and they turned to see that it was Jessie's, as she was projecting herself on a video monitor across the kingdom, and a whole bunch of people, including the kingdom residents, were listening in. Anyways, while on the video monitor, Jessie announced to everyone listening that Hansen had brought a Togepi from the Togepi Paradise to the Mirage Kingdom to rule, and stated that he was now the new king, as she begins to go on about how great he would be as king, blazing him up as she showed him and Togepi as proof that Hansen had acquired a Togepi. Then, Jessie's face extends to multiple more monitors in the town, so that the entire town heard this next announcement, being that Hansen would attend the ceremony with Togepi quite soon at the temple, so that he could become the new king officially. The broadcast then ended on the monitor, leaving all of the townspeople confused at how there was suddenly a new ruler, not wanting a new ruler, as Miranda was shocked as well, not wanting a new ruler either, as she feared that if Hansen actually became the king, then she would be forced to be his servant instead of Sarah's or her parents'. As for Sarah, she was more concerned about her parents, as she turned to Miranda and asked what the fuck they were going to do to try and find them and get them back, knowing that Hansen must have done something to them. Ash suggests that they had to go back to get Togepi anyways by going to the palace, so stated that they could just get into conflict with Hansen, and then once they got back Togepi, they could question Hansen where he had put Sarah's parents. Misty admitted that Ash had a good idea, although was shocked, which made Ash wonder why Misty was shocked, thinking that he had good ideas all the time, but Misty didn't think so. Although Misty thought Ash had a good idea, though, she did admit that it was a bit risky, so she was kind of unsure about it. Brock butted in, though, saying that nothing was too risky for him, stating that he would do anything to make Sarah happy. He would fight through air or sea, no matter what. Of course, Misty, hearing this, pulls Brock away, accusing him of just trying to flirt and impress Sarah. May was surprised, but still impressed with how Misty was able to pull away Brock like that, and Max felt the same way, although he also found it quite funny and amusing, and began to think that maybe he should start pulling Brock away as well. Are we gonna get a reoccurring gag once again, just with Max instead of Misty? Meanwhile, in the palace, Hansen was enjoying being the new ruler, although technically still unofficial, as he sat on the throne with Togepi asleep in his lap. Team Rocket then approached him and bowed down, and they asked when he planned on rewarding them. Hansen just laughed and ordered Team Rocket to leave the motherfucking kingdom immediately. Team Rocket was shocked by this, as they tried to remind Hansen that he had promised a reward, but Hansen just laughs more, and states that Team Rocket never made it clear what they even wanted in return for helping. Team Rocket became confused, stating that they obviously just wanted something rare, like gold or other valuables like silver, platinum, diamonds, pearls. Okay, they didn't actually say that, but they wanted other valuables. Hansen just refuses, leading Team Rocket to laugh, thinking that it was just a cruel joke, but they realized that Hansen really did just have no intention of rewarding them, and had backstabbed them, as he orders his Pokemon to attack Team Rocket, joking that he would reward them plentifully with a very strong attack, ordering his Shedinja and Ninjask to use Solar Beam and Hyper Beam to send Team Rocket blasting off. Team Rocket freaks out, screaming, as they do, getting blasted off out of the side of the castle. Meanwhile, Ash and May had sent out their Trico and Beautyfly, respectively, to go over to the palace and do an aerial search to look for Sarah's parents, as they figured that it would now be too risky, just as Misty had suggested. So they're like, oh, we might as well just send Tailo and Beautyfly. But unfortunately, even though Tailo and Beautyfly did spot the hole that Team Rocket had blasted off through, they didn't see any sign of the king or the queen. Apparently, though, Tailo and Beautyfly were so focused on finding the king and queen that they had missed the hole that Team Rocket had blasted off through, as when Ash and May asked Tailo and Beautyfly if they had managed to find a secret way into the castle, into the palace, so that they could sneak up on Hansen, Tailo and Beautyfly both shook their heads, denying this, so they must not have seen the hole. Brock then warned everyone that there wasn't much time left until the official ceremony that would make Hansen the new leader was about to begin, so he suggested that they take the risk and go into the palace themselves, and Miranda agreed, stating her belief that the reason why the king or queen couldn't be seen by Beautyfly or Talo was probably because they were being kept in the dungeon, and Talo and Beautyfly obviously couldn't see the king or queen from deep down that far in the palace. The rest of the gang agreed as well, especially Misty, who was scared for what would happen to Togepi. This made Brock realize that it would probably be good for them to split up into two teams. One team to go up and confront Hansen to get Togepi back, and the other to go to the dungeon to get the king and queen back. So Ash, Misty, May, and Princess Sarah decided that they were going to rescue Togepi, while Brock, Max, and Miranda would search for Sarah's parents. Meanwhile, Hansen had arrived at the coronation temple with Togepi in his hand, and he then said a chant as he placed Togepi on a pedestal in the middle of the temple. The pedestal and Togepi then began to glow, and when the glowing stopped, the priest that was there to officially officiate Hansen as the new ruler exclaimed that because of Togepi glowing, Chanson was now officially the king, and Chanson laughed, very happy, declaring himself as the new king over and over and over and over and over. Just then, above the temple, the upside-down castle illusion appeared once again, even though it had disappeared after Togepi had left the portal, suggesting that Hanson's new coronation could have been related to the upside-down castle illusion. Meanwhile, an injured Team Rocket had just come back into the kingdom and were walking the streets after their huge-ass blast-off, trying to recover from their injuries, even though Jessie was still severely injured, having to walk with a cane. Jessie and James then cursed Hansen, stating that they never should have trusted him and never should have gone along with a plan that wasn't Giovanni's. Although James reminded Meowth and Jessie that they simply were just desperate for money, and they thought that Hansen would give them money, as like a little side job. Jessie simply told James to shut up, stating that she didn't care about no money right now. All she wanted was revenge against that fucking Hansen bastard. As Team Rocket were talking, they then stopped as they got distracted by Miranda, Max, Brock, and Brock's Mudkip rushing by, with Brock assuring Miranda that he could use his Mudkip to water gun a hole into the palace so that they could get in and then deal with Hansen. After finding Sarah's parents, of course, Team Rocket took hiding behind a tree, not wanting to be spotted, as Brock, Mudkip, Miranda, and Max passed by. And Jessie realized the perfect way to get revenge on Hansen for betraying them, helping out Brock, Miranda, and Max by telling them the location of where Sarah's parents were. So, Team Rocket comes out from the tree and manages to run ahead of Brock, Max, Miranda, and Brock's Mudkip, and they quickly disguise themselves as gypsy fortune tellers, the same disguises that they've always had for their fortune teller disguises. Jessie then asks them if they wanted to have their fortunes read, but Max stated that they were all in a hurry. Team Rocket simply ignores that, as they look into their crystal ball anyways to tell their fortunes, and remark that when looking into their futures, even though they obviously weren't, they saw Hansen at the temple with Togepi, revealing that Hansen had become the king because of this. However, Brock, Max, and Miranda stated they already knew this, leading Team Rocket to state that they were just setting the stage, and added that they then saw a king and a queen trapped in the dungeon of the palace. Brock thanked the fortune tellers for the info, still not knowing they were Team Rocket, as the fortune tellers made their exit. Miranda then declared that she knew about where the dungeon was located, so she would be able to lead Brock and Max to the dungeon so that they could rescue the king and queen, and stated that after this, they should probably go to the temple to help Ash, May, and Misty, and Sarah confront Hansen. And Brock and Max agreed as they went off toward the dungeon in the castle. Meanwhile, Hansen had just left the coronation temple and had gone up to the upside-down castle illusion and ordered Togepi to use metronome to open the portal to the Togepi paradise, exclaiming that he was now the most powerful person in Mirage Kingdom, and he would be the most powerful person in the Togepi paradise as well, taking it over, when suddenly Talo appeared in front of Hansen, leading him to call out his Shedinja and Ninjask and order them to attack Talo, although Talo soon flies away from the Ninjask and Shedinja towards Misty, Ash, May, and Sarah, who had arrived as well, declaring that they were ready to battle to take down Hansen. Hansen just laughed, stating that neither of them could ever be prepared to face him. He was too strong now, because he was the goddamn king, baby. May, Ash, Misty, and Sarah were disgusted by Hansen's attitude, with May commenting that Hansen should be ashamed of himself, and Sarah demanding that Hansen stop whatever he was planning, stating that he'd gone way too far, kidnapping a goddamn Togepi, and also kidnapping her fucking parents. However, Hansen refuses to give up, and simply just tells his Ninjasks and Shedinja to attack. The two Ninjasks rush in first, leading May to send out her Torchic, having the type advantage against bug Pokemon, to use an Ember, using it on one of them, as the other one was too fast. But since Torchic had only hit this one, this allowed the one that was too fast to hit Torchic with a Shadow Ball, forcing May to recall it, because the Shadow Ball was such a strong hit. Pikachu then uses Thunderbolt on both the Ninjask, and much to Hansen's shock, this Thunderbolt caused a huge explosion, and when the dust settled, it was revealed that both of Hansen's Ninjasks were knocked out. So, Hansen ordered Shedinja to use Solar Beam, refusing to give up. But even more to Hansen's shock, as the Solar Beam was charging up and then launched towards everyone, a barrier appeared, blocking the attack. Ash and the gang and Misty and Sarah were shocked as well, wondering what caused the barrier, when suddenly Misty's Togepi came to in Hansen's arms, no longer being basically enamored by using metronome, as all the other Togepi emerge into the real world from the Togepi paradise. They had all decided to help out, as May now identified the barrier as being a safeguard after learning about the move safeguard through Togepi's Pokedex entry. All the Togepi Paradise Togepi then begin to use a metronome of some kind as they float down from the portal. Although, instead of the metronome performing an attack, the metronome instead launches several tiny beams of blue light at Togepi, which gives it a huge burst of energy while it was still in Hansen's hands. Basically, the Paradise Togepi had shared their energy with Misty's Togepi through metronome. Likely able to do this because it used the healing powers of a safeguard. Basically, the metronome seemed to activate a safeguard. Togepi distributes some of this energy as it rises up from Hansen's hands and blows him back with its own created barrier. But just then, Togepi uses the rest of the energy it was given to emit itself fully in a blue light of blue energy, and it begins to glow and evolve into its evolved form, Togetic, immensely shocking Ash and May. As well as Misty, as Misty thought that Togepi would stay a Togepi forever. She never even thought of it evolving. As for Sarah, she was just amazed to see a Togetic in the flesh, only hearing legends of Togetic since Mirage Kingdom was so focused on Togepi. Then, Togetic flew down to Misty to greet it, as Misty asked if it was alright after being captured by Hansen. Togetic nods to assure Misty that it was okay, as it flew up to the other Togepi, making Misty impressed, as Togetic managed to inspire the other Togepi to battle against Hansen, who was fuming mad at Togetic for evolving, stating that regardless of this, he refused to give up, and he was now the king, and nobody was going to take that title away from him. Hansen then tells his Shedinja to use Solar Beam, although the Togetic and all the Togepi teamed up and used a massive safeguard together. Hansen was not impressed by the safeguard, commenting that, unlike him, who, as the king, could have the power to affect everyone, the safeguard could only affect the Togetic and Togepi. And Hansen proceeded to mock the Togepi and Togetic, stating that they were supposed to be the guardian Pokemon of everyone in Mirage Kingdom, and yet they could only protect themselves. Just then, though, as Ash and the gang and Misty encouraged the Togetic and Togepi to continue using Safeguard, the Safeguard aura got noticeably bigger, and the entire area flashed with a white light, leading Sarah to come to the conclusion that the Safeguard was enhanced by a Pokemon's kindness. So basically, if the Togepi or Togetic saw a human was kind, then they would grant their Safeguard powers, and their Safeguard powers would increase, and stated that kindness-related shit was something Hansen would never understand. Colonel Hansen then has his Shedinja launch yet another Solar Beam, but the super large Safeguard at this point was able to easily deflect it. The entire area was now engulfed in the Safeguard's bright white light, with Hansen in shock that the Togepi and Togetic were actually protecting Ash and the gang. And Ash and the gang were very happy to see Hansen complain about how he believed the Togepi and Togetic should now help him and only create a barrier around him, admitting that the Togepi and Togetic were powerful. However, Sarah countered that the Togepi and Togetic would not help him since they saw that he was a bad person, not a good person, and also not fit to be a king. Misty was immensely impressed with her Togetic, as well as all the other Togepi's abilities, but acknowledged how they were only protecting, they weren't attacking, and Hansen and his Pokemon needed to be attacked. So she pulled out a Pokeball and told Togetic that she would help it out, as she then kissed the Pokeball and threw out none other than her Gyarados, because she had retrieved it from the Cerulean Gym to use it on her own now, since it was because of her that the Gyarados liked humans now. Ash, as you can imagine, was immensely shocked upon seeing Misty use a Gyarados, because, for one, he had never saw her use one before, and two, he thought that she hated Gyarados. As for Hansen's reaction to the Gyarados, he wasn't worried at all, as he mentioned that due to his Shedinja's Wonder Guard, water attacks, which he believed were all the Gyarados had, would do nothing against it. But Misty smiled, confident, as she utterly surprised Hansen by having her Gyarados use none other than Flamethrower, which broke through Shedinja's Wonder Guard, taking it out, since Shedinja was weak to Flamethrower. Hansen was also particularly furious due to the Flamethrower also burning off a part of his mustache, making him fall back in the process, and Misty laughed at this, remarking that Pokemon had many surprises up their sleeve. Ash and the gang then questioned Misty on how she got her Gyarados to use Flamethrower, leading Misty to state that simply some water Pokemon could learn fire attacks too, especially Gyarados, since it was part Dragon type, and because of Gyarados' fused Dragon type, she was able to teach it some fierce fire attacks as well or some shit. Just then, it was revealed that Brock, Max, and Miranda had rescued the King and the Queen, and the King and the Queen had managed to convince all their guards to rejoin them. So, the King, Queen, the guards, Brock, Max, and Miranda all arrived behind Hansen, ready to help defeat him. And this was very easy for the King to do, as he just had to place Hansen under arrest for treason and kidnapping. Hansen initially wanted to resist, but when he saw all the guards surround him, he realized it was hopeless, and the guards would beat his ass if he protested, so he just decided to shut up and to be taken to be arrested, and he would soon be transported to the dungeon where he had left the King and the Queen, where he was supposed to suffer for life. Meanwhile, Team Rocket were actually watching Hansen's arrest with binoculars from a nearby rooftop, happy that he was being taken away. Basically, they saw it as punishment that Hansen deserved for betraying them. They were also immensely amused to see Hansen crying as he was being taken away, making fun of him for this. And then Team Rocket all cheered about how revenge was super sweet, and how Team Rocket had gotten off scot-free and hadn't blasted off this time, so they could fight another day. Under Giovanni, not some random-ass contractor again. Later, after Hansen's arrest, all the Togepi were happy now, as the Togepi paradise would now be a safe place to live in, since Hansen couldn't manipulate it with his evil heart anymore, so they all happily returned to the Togepi paradise. Once all the Togepi were safe in the paradise, Togetic flew down to Misty, as Misty congratulated it on its great effort today. Misty soon realized through Togetic motioning to her that Togetic wanted to join the Togepi in the Togepi paradise as well, so that it could protect them from any future harm or any future bad humans. Misty was sad, obviously not wanting to part with Togetic after all this time, but Misty reluctantly supported the idea, knowing that it was for the best. Though reminded Togetic that it needed to protect the Mirage Kingdom as well as Sarah, not just the Togepi paradise, and Togetic agreed. Misty knew that it was now time to say goodbye to her Togetic, and she assured it that even though she'd be sad, she wouldn't hold Togetic back, with Sarah saying that this was very wise of Misty, since it was Togetic's destiny to protect the Togepi paradise now. As for Ash, Brock, and Max, they were just amazed by what was happening. Misty then starts saying goodbye to her Togetic as she grabbed its hands and tells it that no matter where it was, they would always be friends, and nothing would change that. Togetic nodded in agreement and started to cry, along with Misty, as Misty said that she would always remember it, and the two shared one last embrace. Misty then said some final lovey-dovey shit to Togetic as May cried hysterically in the background, finding their departure extremely sad. Misty and Togetic then stop hugging as Misty lets go and tearfully watches as Togetic rises up to the portal, and Togetic looks back one more time as Ash, Brock, and Max say goodbye to it as well. Misty then yells for it to not forget her, and Togetic nods as it goes into the portal to Togepi Paradise and disappears, and immediately after this, the illusionist castle disappears. Misty was obviously sad, but Princess Sarah cheered Misty up by assuring her that she would do everything she could to make sure that no bad people became king or queen, so that the Togepi Paradise and Togetic would remain protected from harm. Sarah also apologizes to Misty, just sorry for the entire situation, stating that she shouldn't have had to have lost her Togepi, now a Togetic, and Misty stated that she was sad, but she understood at the end of the day. Suddenly, a Togepi brushed against Sarah's leg. Princess Sarah initially thought that it was just the wind or something tugging on her dress, but nope, it was a Togepi, and as Misty suggested, it was likely a Togepi that had decided not to return to the Togepi Paradise. Sarah was just excited to have a Togepi of her own, but Miranda was excited as she reminded Sarah that now that she had her own Togepi, she could become the new ruler, and Sarah was excited by this as well. Sarah's new Togepi then hopped into her arms, and the two of them hugged as Sarah thanked Ash and the gang for all their help and continued to hug her new Pokemon. After this, Misty knew that it was time for her to return to Cerulean City to resume her gym leader duty to help out her sisters, and realized that she could just use the blimp that Team Rocket had used. So Misty and Ash and the gang went to the blimp, and Misty revealed her intention to go back to Cerulean to help out with the gym, but admits that she did have a lot of fun seeing Ash and Brock again, and meeting May and Max for the first time. Max stated his wish to hear more about the gym, wanting to see it in person, so Misty invited everyone to come back to the gym if they ever came back to Kanto. Misty then tells Max to keep learning everything he can, and she wishes May luck in her future contest, and Ash luck in his future gym battles, and the Hoenn League. With that, Ash promises to win the Hoenn League, and May promises to win her Pokemon contest, as Misty gets in the blimp and flies off to Cerulean City, waving goodbye to all her friends. The episode then ends with one last scene of the Togepi Paradise, and we see that since Hansen's corrupt self was no longer influencing the paradise, it had been restored to the lush place that it once was, and Togetic was flying over, observing the lush place and the Togepi to make sure that they were safe, and smiled happily, knowing that they were safe.